Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We start with a look back over the last 7 days at total accumulated precipitation, and after the historic week we saw last week in terms of the depth of the cold air in the midsection of the country, what we got here in the Carolinas was just an abundant amount of precipitation. Now, this doesn't include all that we've had here this is only the last 7 days. And there are places here that saw from South Carolina through North Carolina, several inches of rain, over 3 to 5, in some places over 6. North of us, we had ice and we had snow in Virginia up along the Appalachian Mountains, and it was just a rough week. But let me put this in perspective. Just in the last 2 weeks alone, we have seen, as you approach the coast here, some locations that have seen in excess of 300% of normal precipitation. And from there, I can at least show you the latest statistics from January 1st through February 22nd through today. Currently, right now, these two climate reporting districts are having their second wettest year on record. And it's just amazing to see how wet the state of North Carolina has been as of late. Now, we start off with this information because after I kind of do a quick review of the winter weather we had last week, just a few lessons to be learned there. Unfortunately, this pattern is going to continue over on the wetter side of things into the future. Now, what gave us so many problems last week, is actually right here. This high pressure cell is one that began up here in the Canadian prairies back in like February 3rd and 4th, moved through the plains, cut down into parts of Texas. And what happened is that it allowed for this cold air to nose just like this, on which we saw, the moist air from the Gulf, from the Atlantic running into that, giving us such heavy precipitation. Well, that high pressure cell is now offshore, which means the pattern is changing and it's a lot different than it was last week. But I'll just tell you something. This anticyclone or high pressure cell, when we look back over last week's pressure deviations from normal, might possibly be the most expensive high pressure cell in U.S. history. Given the ice damage, the winter storm damage, the flooding we've seen, the ruining of the crops in parts of Texas, this whole area just hammered with adverse weather, never mind the brutally cold air that was on the northern side of that. Just to show you how cold it was, looking at those ranks maps again, from February 3rd to February 21st, this map puts a number inside of every climate reporting district again. And you can see that the closer you are to the number 129, that'd be the coldest. And there are many locations in here that are having a top 2, 3, 4, or 5 coldest, such almost 3-week time period here, as that Arctic outbreak just slammed this part of the country. Now, from there, I was taking a look at a couple of things. We did have a decent day yesterday, finally, with clearer skies, offshore flow here. You can actually see the cloud streets forming just offshore. A couple of other things to point out here. We've melted all that snow that was in Texas and Oklahoma back up to Kansas. The heavy snow swath is right here from Nebraska through Iowa. And it's the storm system you see here that will eventually make it to the northeast and drag our front through us later on today. Now, thinking about that, let me just show you how much snow we got out of the last 9 days. So just to give you some perspective on how big of a system this was. The places it missed in terms of where we could get snow, the northern plains and California. See that? California, Sierra Nevadas, I'll show you in a few moments the deficits out west. It's going to continue to be a major concern. But to bring snow all the way down south of San Antonio, clear to the Gulf Coast, and parts of, look at this, here in Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, some places in here picking up over 20 inches of snow out of this last system. But I said I wanted to talk about that snow departure because when you look at this, these colors represent more snow than average, and these would represent less snow than average. I pointed out the Sierra Nevadas. Over here. Some places having 40 to over 100 inches in deficit. In the northern plains, where we think about how the Mississippi River or the Missouri River could flood early in the season, well, there's not a lot of snow on the ground here. But look at the state of North Carolina. We've missed out, even though we've had some snow this year. We're technically behind, but just a few inches here, but it's something important to kind of see. Now, today, all the action is to our north and east and to our north and west, where we have high wind warnings coming out of Montana into the northern plains. What we get is we're going to have a band of showers and storms that are going to move through, adding to our rainfall totals. But those winds in the northwest, I just got to show you what they're going to do because I find this fascinating. You see, when the winds come over the Rocky Mountains and descend into the plains, you get what's called compressional warming. Now, the winds go really fast. You can see here they're 30 to 50 miles an hour. But as they descend in the atmosphere, they warm. And therefore, by the middle of this afternoon on Monday, the 22nd, this map shows you what temperatures are going to look like. And it's incredible to see this region, which saw temperatures getting down into the minus 30 to 40 range last week with wind chills as low as minus 50 to 60. Well, now the freezing line is way up to the north here. We could be getting 50-degree weather in the northern plains. Like I said, though, there is a front coming through, and you can even see it right here at this time. We're going to talk about that in just a few moments. But bigger picture, we're going to watch the development of a subtropical ridge. And it is going to be the mechanism by which we pump quite a bit of moisture into a boundary that's going to stall out later this week, right here in this region. And that is going to extend heavy rainfall from the Red River Valley through the Mid-Atlantic. And what's going to be difficult to see here is the southern extent of the heaviest rainfall. Because you notice along the Gulf Coast and parts of the East Coast here in the Carolinas, there are drier biases, but focused heavy rainfall right in through this area. Now, I want to do a little bit of model comparison for you here, because you know we have this other model called the GFS. The GFS and the European actually have a pretty similar pattern and amount of rainfall for this next few systems that are going to come through. And again, they're keeping the northern half of North Carolina into Virginia quite wet. But the GFS just made a major upgrade, and they have a new model called the GFS V16. Now, for those car people that are watching my video, I know it's a pretty cool name for a weather model. But it has got a more northerly trajectory of this frontal boundary, and therefore only keeps the northern counties of North Carolina on the wetter side of things, wetter than normal through the next 7 days. So interesting to watch these two models kind of do battle here. Now, the pattern, as I said, is going to be dominated by three things, and we're going to watch it again. So here's just your next 10 days. First, do you see all the warmer colors down here between the Yucatan and Florida? Let's watch it again. That is the development of the subtropical ridge I keep talking about. So what does it do? It pushes weather systems back farther to the west. You see them dipping down into the west and then lifting to the northeast, dipping to the west, lifting to the northeast. That means we're going to favor a more open transport of Gulf of Mexico moisture, which is why we see the wetter conditions. But the troughs move north, which is also going to help us moderate our temperatures. The next thing to watch in this is this ridge in the Gulf of Alaska move west. Look, see, there it is. Now it's sitting way back here over the Aleutian Islands by the time we get out to the beginning of March. And what that will be critical to see is if it adjusted all the position of that subtropical jet stream, moving the ridge farther here over toward Mexico. The last thing is, let's watch up here. This is the tropospheric polar vortex, and it just slowly migrates and heads over here toward north of the Hudson Bay. Now you might ask, why do I explain these things to you? These are the pieces that are moving across the northern hemisphere, across North America, that ultimately govern our temperature and precipitation patterns. And it begins here with our first system. This is a look at our high-resolution NAM model. And I'm going to start it over for you again because we're going to watch mid-morning through afternoon here, a band of showers, and maybe even a thunderstorm roll through. But after that, through Wednesday morning, you get drier conditions. Watch it again. Comes through mid-morning into the afternoon, and that's when it brings the next round of rain. But we're drier, as you see, through Wednesday. Well, when do our chances of precipitation pick back up? Let's switch over to the European model to see it. So now we're playing out again. There's Tuesday, getting into Wednesday. Let's just keep going out here. And finally, at the end of the week, notice right here, this is Thursday midday, Thursday evening, now getting into Friday morning. The high-pressure cell moves over upstate New York. We still have the open flow to the south. And toward the end of this weekend, that's where the frontal boundary sets up. Do you see it right there? So you get through much of this week on a drier note after today's rain. But then what we see here is that going into Friday, Friday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening, we just are going to see this boundary sit in this area. And then getting through the weekend, this is now going all the way through Sunday morning, Sunday midday, Sunday evening. We're going to really increase our chances of rainfall beginning at the end of this week and lasting into next week. So to continue this narrative, let's just take a look again at the total model output. First, the European. Notice that when you get north of the line I'm kind of drawing right in through here, we're talking about really good chances at seeing maybe 2 inches of rainfall through the next week. Is it echoed in the GFS? The GFS has got about 1.5 to 2 inches in that area. In the GFS V16 is now looking at your precip between 1/2 inch and upwards of 1 3/4 inches. So it's the drier of the three models. But the point is that we're so saturated right now, any precipitation when looking out over the next week is going to be a lot. Now, to explain to you why I go to all the trouble to get you to understand the jet stream is just to look at it here. You see, the flow in the atmosphere begins in Hawaii and streaks across Mexico and then races to Maine. That puts this area right through here as having the strongest temperature gradient, therefore having the greatest possibility of developing fronts on which we get all this precipitation. Going from the end of week 1 out to about day 11 here, there are some changes, but just notice that the strong branch of the subtropical jet stream still goes from Texas through the mid-Atlantic, which is why when you look out there into week 2, we continue to see the above average precipitation possibilities clipping North Carolina here. All right? So we are not slowing down with this above average precipitation pattern, maybe not until we get into the middle of the month of March. So the probability over the next 2 weeks at getting at least 2 inches of rainfall, well, you can see here throughout much of the state, we're looking at a 50 to 80% chance, with much higher chances of getting over 2 inches of rainfall through parts of the Ohio, Tennessee Valley back toward the Mid-South. So that's where that boundary is going to be set up on, okay? Looking farther out, though, I'm going to take you all the way out here to the week that ends on the 14th of March. And we do start to see, well, there's still some hints of a wetter pattern here, but nothing like we had been seeing. Also, we start to see better chances of precipitation into California as well. And the better the chances increase over California, the lower they will become over here in the mid-Atlantic through the Carolinas. So let's watch the West Coast very carefully moving through the middle of this month. How about those temperatures? And as I told you, in the high plains and in the northern plains, look at this. From going from -40 to +50 inside of a week is just incredible. But as we play this forward, we have Tuesday as a milder day for us here. And then, went a little fast there. Let's now get over to Wednesday, another mild day. But as you saw toward the end of the week, here's Thursday's temperatures. Getting into Friday, that's our rain-cooled air that comes in toward the end of the week. And last, as you see here, into the weekend for the Carolinas. So a milder start to the week after the rain today, and then we go back over to a cooler week. Now, just notice when you see the cold air that's locked up here in the northern plains, this is not going to be just racing down here and dumping us over into brutally cold air. This shot of cold air is going to migrate a little bit farther to the north and east. You can see that when I show you the day 5 through 10 time period. Both the GFS and the European model keep that cooler air to the west, although they disagree a lot on the Canadian prairies. But look at us. We see above average temperatures moving into the middle of March. Now with the warmer conditions, not only here in the day 10 forecast, but out to day 15, this is going to get us thinking about a rapid go of it here with getting this next crop in and ready. In fact, some folks have already been moving. Now just thinking about that, I want to stretch it out longer term here as we get toward the end of this video. First of all, polar vortex over the next 10 days continues to retreat. In fact, it goes back to the Arctic, back into Siberia. And again, this is the stratospheric polar vortex. The tropospheric polar vortex is sitting here over the Canadian archipelago. Therefore, getting us out all the way to the spring equinox, we notice where the coldest air is going to be. And we're going to be favoring more mild conditions here, well, across the Cotton Belt, across parts of the Mid-South, getting here into the Tennessee and Ohio Valley, over toward the Appalachian Mountains and Mid-Atlantic. Definitely see that pattern setting up here through the third week of March. From there, a bit on international weather. You remember back in June, it feels like so long ago, but back in June we talked about that big dust plume that came off of the Saharan and then moved all the way over to the United States. Well, the Sahara Desert is added again, and a couple of days ago, look at the dust here. Well, one of these big cyclones, like this going into the North Atlantic, grabbed it and pulled it up here into Europe. So cutting across the Mediterranean, big dust storm for Europe this go around, as the Saharan once again just has this incredible ability to spread its dust. By the way, just so you understand how big this desert is, you could fit the lower 48 in the Saharan Desert. Boy, what a massive, beautiful desert there. Let's finish with South America. Two maps. On the left, the first 21 days or first 3 weeks of February total precip. But I removed over on the right everything below 2 inches because I'm trying to look for regions where there's been some drought. Now, certainly the heavy rains north have continued to hamper harvest progress, and it's the slowest harvest, primarily due to how late it was planted, but it's the slowest harvest up here in many, many years. But let's do this. While it's been dry in southern Brazil and Argentina, it's been relatively cool. But if we just back off and only show you locations in white now that have seen less than an inch, I found a few areas in Argentina I'm getting concerned about. One of those is near Cordoba, which is right here. Very dry in October, November, near normal rains in December, very wet in January. But as of late, the last time they'd measured substantial rain there was back at the very end of January, and it's been dry ever since. This is an area that I'm concerned about. What saved them from having disasters is that the high temperatures have been below normal. See the end of the graph here? What about moving over towards Santa Fe, which is about right in this area? Santa Fe had a very wet January as well, but since the end of January, it has not rained. They also have been blessed with the cooler weather while it's been dry, but 3 weeks of drier weather, then looking out showing that the temperatures are starting to increase in this region over the next week, where it will continue to be on the drier side of things, starts to get me concerned about Argentina's weather patterns moving forward. Because stretching this out into week 2, the models keep it wet to the north where they're trying to harvest a crop in Brazil, but drier into Argentina. And even the longer range models continue that all the way out to the end of March. That could be a weather story that the markets could be watching and telling. I just want to keep you all aware of it when we're thinking about soybeans, corn, and cotton. Okay? So with that, thank you for your attention. I'll talk to you again next Monday. Until then, have a great week. Thanks.